Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Forum Daily West, and here are some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's government freezes its industrial carbon price and answers questions about Alberta separation from Ottawa. Plus, the group leading Alberta separation says it wants to see a citizen-led referendum on the ballot as early as this fall. And the final living American hostage held in Gaza released today. Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says her government is freezing its industrial carbon price effective immediately at $95 per ton of emissions. The industrial carbon price had been scheduled to increase to $110 next year and continue rising to $170 per ton by 2030. Smith says Prime Minister Mark Carney's move to cancel the federal consumer carbon tax shortly after he took office in March is an indication of where the discussion is at.
The fact that the first action that Prime Minister Mark Carney took was to eliminate the retail carbon tax shows you that that price had gotten too high to bear. And I think that it's reasonable to expect that it's a parallel in the business community, that the price has gotten too high to bear. If you have a time frame of going out to 2050, there's no reason to try to front end load everything by 2030. That's been foundational to the dispute we're having with the federal government. Is let's coordinate around a 2050 target so that you can have a reasonable time frame to implement technology, develop new solutions, see the retirement of equipment. That's foundationally why we're having the dispute with Ottawa. The 170, could it have been possible if the Americans were following suit? I don't know. But you may have noticed there's a change of direction in the United States since November, which has caused a massive recalibration of everything in Canada. And if we want to be able to compete and integrate with our largest consumer, then we've got to have a reasonable level of increase. So as you've seen, we're not proposing it goes to zero. We're just proposing that it stays where it is. Well, we have some kind of recalibration about how this is going to impact the business community. What we have heard.
The Premier says the freeze is also critical to keep Albertan industry competitive and defend jobs during Canada's tariff fight with the United States. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation likes this move, calling it a no-brainer that will make Alberta more competitive, save taxpayers money, and protect jobs. Alberta separation also came up at today's news conference. The Alberta Prosperity Project, which is already moving full steam ahead with a citizen-initiated referendum, today released the question it wants to see on the ballot. The question reads, do you agree that the province of Alberta should become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? Premier Smith was asked about it.
Sign up on a website saying that they will ultimately sign a petition is one thing. Getting the physical signatures signed up is another. That's why we have to wait for the process to play out. We haven't yet passed the legislation, and so once the legislation passes, it'll be pretty clear what the timeframes are. I know that there are several groups out there that are proposing different timelines, different questions, and so I'll wait to see which one garners enough signatures and actually gets a petition campaign going before I would comment on that. But I've made my position clear. I support a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, and it's my job to see if we can get a new deal with Ottawa so that I can convince more Albertans to feel the same.
The Prosperity Project has said it would like to see a referendum as early as this fall. And what do Albertans think about all this talk of separation? The Canadian Press went out and asked.
Our economic growth has been stifled for decades. We haven't been able to get manufacturing out here. There's a lot of things that money just stays east, and we need to change that. So we need, then the government, federal government has to do that. You always hear the grumbling, but how many people really want to separate?
I understand and sympathize with some of the concerns that have been going on in our country, but this does not, in my opinion, is not the direction to go. That we should be working on resolving the issues rather than just take my ball and go home if I don't like the way the game's going.
I don't want Alberta to separate from the rest of Canada because I'm keeping in mind those who are already marginalized and what it might mean for them if that happens.
The life I'm having here is because of Canada. So I love the country. Country comes first always. There's something you can say in my blood.
I think BC and Saskatchewan have equally been
neglected in terms of representation. And so I'd hope that if we start the movement, that they'd be willing to join. But if they aren't willing to join, I don't want us to leave.
Well, overseas celebrations were held in Israel Monday after Hamas released the last living Israeli American soldier, Idan Alexander from Gaza. The Israeli military confirmed that Alexander had been turned over to the Red Cross and was being brought to Israeli forces. Alexander was released in a goodwill gesture toward the Trump administration that could lay the groundwork for a new ceasefire with Israel.
I'm standing right here because Idan Alexander is going to get back from captivity in Gaza, and we're waiting for the 58 others.
Idan Alexander's family members and friends also gathered on Monday ahead of his expected release.
We ate around, I think, 7, 8 o'clock, and we didn't know nothing. Then suddenly we got the news and we saw the internet, and we was shocked. We were shocked that it was the best news that we had for 584 days.
The markets reacted positively today following a 90-day pause on tariffs between China and the United States. Negotiators from those two nations met in Switzerland and agreed to reduce tariffs during a 3-month negotiation period. The White House saying it would cut duties on Chinese imports from 145% to 30%, and U.S. imports into China would be cut to 10% from 125%.
First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that, or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals. The talks in Geneva were very friendly. The relationship is very good. We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest, and they were very happy to be able to do something with us.
President Trump also signed a sweeping executive order Monday, setting a 30-day deadline for drug makers to electively lower the cost of prescription drugs in the U.S. or face new limits down the road over what the government will pay.
Even though the United States is home to only 4% of the world's population, pharmaceutical companies make more than 2/3 of their profits in America. So think of that. With 4% of the population, the pharmaceutical companies make most of their money. But it's called Most Favored Nation. We are going to pay the lowest price there is in the world. We will get whoever is paying the lowest price. That's the price that we're going to get.
Now back here in southern Alberta, more than 4,000 doses of fentanyl worth of approximately $80,000 were taken off the Lethbridge streets after police arrested a 39-year-old man who was found sleeping at the scene of a break and enter on May 11th. When the man woke up, he provided a false name to police, resisted arrest, and attempted to flee on foot. He was apprehended a short distance away along with fentanyl, cannabis, cash, and a taser. Jade Levi Trotter of Lethbridge is charged and scheduled to appear in court on May the 13th. Lethbridge police have located and arrested a man charged in connection with a sexual assault investigation. 26-year-old Terrence Cooper Dane Many Gray Horses of Lethbridge is charged with 2 counts each of sexual interference, sexual assault, and unlawful confinement. He has ties to both Lethbridge and the Blood Reserve. We will have more details to share once more information becomes available. The town of Coaldale says they have passed the second and third readings of this year's property tax bylaw, which will see a 2.85% increase on residential property taxes. This will mean that for a house with an average value of $366,000, taxes will increase by around $204 per year. Coaldale residents, however, will still pay 6% less in annual property taxes than Lethbridge. Additionally, the town's non-residential municipal mill rate will increase by 3.2% and yet is still 49% lower than Lethbridge and 12% lower than Tabor. The town says that the recent demand and growth in Coaldale naturally brings the increase of amenities and services, yet they are committed to keeping a competitive and satisfying tax rate for all residents.
This is an annual thing that we do, and we like to do it annually because things change quickly. requirements for cost change. So it allows us to be ensure we have the most efficient and effective spending for the residents of Coaldale. There's such good momentum in Coaldale right now. Like there's such a demand for business and residents moving here, right? And that helps our tax bases. Having more residents and having more businesses here helps reduce the burden from everybody. So as we try to grow our community, that's just going to keep increasing the services that we have here for residents, but at a lower cost. So we're focused on maintaining a cost-effective and a competitive tax rate here that brings businesses to Coaldale to want to invest in Coaldale.
Well, mental health is a priority in the lives of our first responders, but to help others, they need to be healthy first. That's why Alberta's government budget 2025 is investing $1.5 million annually to support the mental health of first responders who live with or are at risk of post-traumatic stress injuries. Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services Wellness Support Specialist Shelley Kruger explains the danger, trauma, and crisis our first responders usually face.
Staff deal with high acuity stress day in and day out in daily operations. So they are attending to many high acuity calls each and every day. Things like motor vehicle collisions that could be traumatic to cardiac arrest patients, structure fires, and the next call, and the next call, and the next call. So it's day in and day out for them. It's critical that we have these in-house mental health and wellness supports for our first responders. Navigate through programs, identify what exactly is going on, and mitigate any of those psychological injuries by implementing the wellness support quickly and efficiently. So what we can do is really focus on our preventative measures and have everybody prepared right from recruit up to retirement as to how we handle these situations. It's such a tough job, so when the community can help out by saying thank you, social media posts, dropping off cards, all of those things matter and really bring meaning to the madness and to the tough job that they do. So that really does help impact their mental health and wellness.
And speaking of emergency crews, they turned into Mother's Day heroes when they were called to the scene of a Lethbridge restaurant to rescue some trapped diners. As BCN's Naveen Day reports, Sunday's incident turned out to be a memorable Mother's Day for some local patrons.
It's almost like those fairy tale stories and movies where a maiden is trapped up in a tower waiting for her hero to rescue her. Almost. What unfolded at a Mother's Day lunch at the Water Tower Grill became a memorable story for two women with physical limitations after the restaurant's only elevator broke down.
Usually a Mother's Day is one of the busiest days for us for the whole year. And we had 200 customers in the lunchtime. So they all came in between 11:15 to 12. And probably we use a lot of flights up and down. Elevator sends it hot temperature, and it started shut down.
With no timeline when the elevator would be fixed, patrons were required to go up and down the stairwell, which consists of 150 steps. 911 was then dispatched to assist two patrons who had physical limitations.
Initially, two trucks from this station, the downtown station, were dispatched. We have an aerial unit called our tower, which along with our rescue truck, we went to the scene to kind of assess things and see what we needed to be able to assist these people out of that building. In the process, we put our aerial device up and looked at the reach for that, as well as we accessed the upstairs of the restaurant and made access with the patients and talked to them and figured out what their physical limitations were and what we were looking at in terms of getting them out, and then came up with a game plan from there.
Usage of the aerial device was ruled out to rescue the two damsels in distress. However, it was used in a tertiary role to shuttle equipment up and down to carry out the rescue mission. A special wheelchair was deployed that allows rescue crews to transport individuals from tight spaces and through stairways. Canal adds the crews even helped him, making sure his patrons were at ease during the ordeal.
Thank you very much for doing this thing, and I couldn't have done without them for sure. And the efficiency and the calmness what they have had, the customers at the end of the time they were a little anxious because it was quite wild there, and when the emergency came they thought, oh, it's going to be a real problem. So they were able to calm down. They were very quiet, polite, and no complaint at all, and everyone was very appreciative to them.
And just like the fairy tales, once they were rescued from the tower, the individuals went on to live happily ever after. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Well, the rallying cry of elbows up is seeing some Canadians' U.S. trips go way down. Stats Canada says the preliminary April figures show return U.S. trips by land and air have declined for the fourth consecutive month. Some Canadians, that is, have canceled their U.S. trips in protest of U.S. tariffs and President Donald Trump's repeated 51st state comments about annexing Canada. Return trips by air fell by nearly 20%, while land border trips dropped by more than 35% from the same time a year earlier. Bell Canada is launching a campaign to prevent competitors from reselling fiber internet service on its network. Build, Connect, and Grow Canada is targeting a February decision by the CRTC allowing telecom giants to sell internet service in regions where they don't own fiber networks by paying the local incumbent to use their infrastructure. Bell is against the policy, which the CRTC has said it will reevaluate this summer after further study. That is your Forum Daily West report. I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks so much for watching.